Scott Paul is the Director of Natural Resource Sustainability at Taylor Guitars, where he works at the intersection of forest conservation, supply chain ethics, and the future of guitar making itself. And I mean, that sounds like a lot of words, but also, if we really unpack that, that's pretty cool. Taylor Guitars is a great brand, and they are focused on making their guitars in ways that support the future of our environment. He informed me about types of wood used in guitars, some things that they pioneered in terms of using certain woods that weren't used and were often disposed of for no other reason that they were, quote, imperfect, unquote. And that's what we're all about here. So he's got one of the coolest jobs in the world. The man's making guitars. He's making guitars sustainable. Cool job, cool company, cool guy. Scott Paul, Taylor Guitars. Scott Paul, hello for the first time.
Hello, Mikey, for the first time.
Welcome. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you. You're doing some of the coolest work out there. You're doing sustainability for a guitar company. I don't know if it gets cooler than that, actually.
Yeah, I don't know what I did in a previous life, but I ended up in a cool place.
Probably a monk of some kind. Tell us your journey, if you could. The sort of, we don't have to start at birth, but whatever feels relevant and how you got to where you are today.
I went to college in the 80s, UMass, and after I graduated, I really did not know what I wanted to do. My buddies were buying suits and moving to Boston, and I ran away to Central America and spent a little over a year. I worked for an orphanage in Guatemala, and I worked for the Costa Rican National Park Service back in the day before tourism really took off. And I'm telling this story because it was working at the Costa Rican National Park Service that I just kind of realized I was really happy, like I really was at peace and kind of just content. And I thought about it and I realized I wanted to do international forest stuff. And that's about as evolved as the thought was, but it was I really leaned into it. And that became my North Star. I went on to graduate school. I went on to Washington, D.C. and had all these jobs. And I always tried to do something, even if it wasn't the most financially responsible option before me. I always tried to do something that I could rationalize as international forest stuff. And going forward, it was like, oh man, like another crappy job choice for me. But now I look in the rearview mirror and it does appear to have all made sense. It's all connected. It's all giving me more life experience related to international forest stuff. And then I ended up at Taylor Guitars doing international forest stuff, and I've never been happier.
That's awesome. And it makes me think of because I think about this a lot, being an older gentleman now, that Carl Jung said life starts at 40. And just thinking about the path we take, and it's like, okay, yeah, I can see all of my stumbles, but also they did add up. Like without those, I wouldn't have figured this part out.
Yep.
And that is the journey, the alchemy of it, I guess. What is it about international forest stuff? Because that wouldn't even be a phrase that entered my mind in college.
I mean, it was just like, again, I was at the top of Volcano National Park. And on Monday through Thursday back in the day, no one showed up at the park. But my job was to go up to the volcano. And it was weird because it was at vantage point where you actually looked down into the mouth of the volcano. And my job was to say, hey, don't climb over that wooden fence and go down into the volcano. Not that anyone ever attempted to do that. And on Monday through Thursday, no one was even at the park. So it was a lot of solitude time. And, I'd read a book and I'd hang out up there and I was like, oh my God, I'm on top of a volcano in Central America, and leaning into that. And that's when I don't even think it's a sentence or a phrase, international forest stuff. But that part I was sure of. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know where that would lead me, but it did become my North Star. And everything I did after that I can justify, at least, was related to it.
Mm.
And it's been really fulfilling for me, and
Yeah.
a lot of, like anyone else, a lot of times you're stressing out and you don't have the money and what are you going to do next? And, this job sucks and all the rest. But I stayed true to my North Star, and I've been relatively happy and not, certainly insecure and freaked out like everyone else at certain times. But by and by, I've led a very interesting life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I just want to say thank you for saying that you were insecure and freaked out like everyone else, because it's you you talk to people doing cool things. You're like, yeah, man, I made the right choices and everything was awesome the whole time. You're like,
No, and especially in a world of social media, you project that, but I
yeah,
assure you, there were lots of times in my career living in an apartment the size of a closet and eating, one meal a day. And that meal was when I was catering later that evening. I would steal food in Washington, D.C. And,
nice.
my friends were driving nice cars, or what I thought were nice cars at the time. Um, and I was like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah,
And of course, everybody's insecure. Everyone questions themselves. Everyone's got anxiety, and that's just part of being a human being.
God, thank you. So true. One question before we move on: were you freaked out when you were by the volcano ever that the thing was going to erupt?
No, I wasn't. I went to another volcano in Costa Rica, Irazu, and that was an active volcano, and you could see the lava. And I wasn't scared, but when you see a volcano, and I've seen volcanoes in Hawaii, and when you actually see the lava, and I saw in Guatemala, I once looked down a chute and I could see it, and it really puts you in your place. You realize that you are not the top of the food chain, or that you are just some like insignificant organism that could be eaten and swallowed in the blink of an eye. So it's a little humbling. Nothing else
Yeah,
ever scared, but sometimes it's good to be put in your place.
fair. Yeah. Plus, there's warning systems, right? Like you got 10 minutes to get down the volcano before it explodes.
Yeah,
Something
that's
like
what they tell you.
allegedly. Yeah. Yeah. One of my lifelong goals is to poke hot lava with a stick. So maybe offline you can point me in the right direction for that.
That could be your North Star.
Yeah, it might be. As if I just get to that point. So you were catering. What happened next? How did you keep following that North Star?
Okay, Central America, bumming around, worked at an orphanage, worked for the park system, eventually ran out of money. Was like, go back to my parents' house, or I could sleep on my brother's couch in Washington, D.C. And I thought that sounded cooler because Washington, D.C. was kind of international.
Yeah.
There was kind of policy, forest stuff surely going on there. So I went to DC, and the first year I suffered mightily. I was temping here and temping there and temping everywhere and catering. And then got totally lucky. My brother met some guy at a cocktail party who worked at the White House. And next thing you know, I was a unpaid intern in the Clinton administration and what they used to call the Office of Environmental Policy. Did that for a year, and it was international forest stuff. And then through that, all the NGOs, all the environmental organizations in DC, who for the previous year would not return any of my phone calls or respond to any of my resumes, they were all trying to, ingratiate themselves to the White House because they were trying to get their stuff passed or through the policy gauntlet. And they had to deal with me. I was the front line. I was the unpaid intern that answered the phone when they called. And I established a relationship, and I worked for this. I left the White House and worked for this environmental group for 3 years that I'd wonk out for a second. In 1992, they had the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. It was probably the most important environmental conference at that point in history, maybe to this day. And forests was the big issue going into Rio. And forests was the big disaster at Rio. They achieved nothing. Um, and all anyone knew was that the UN was destined to try to figure out what are we going to do about forests for the next 10 years. So I worked for an NGO that was tracking that post-Rio process. It was really wonky, but You'd go to the United Nations in New York, and then Geneva, and then New York, and then Geneva, and then New York, and then Geneva. Follow this conversation that's a little bit like professionally watching paint dry, but it was an incredible education. And then from there, Greenpeace. I was at Greenpeace for 14 years doing international forest stuff. And then a couple other jobs, and got married along the way and got 2 kids along the way. And then I'm at Greenpeace. I'm working in Alaska. Alaska is one of the places where Sitka spruce comes from. And Sitka spruce is what is commonly used as soundboards on acoustic guitars.
Okay.
And through that process, I met Bob Taylor, the one of co-founder of Taylor Guitars. We became kind of fast friends. And about the time, Bob was noticing that as a guitar builder who buys a little bit of wood from everywhere, life was getting really complicated. When Taylor started in 1974, there were 4 billion people on the planet. We just had our 50th anniversary, and there's over 8 billion people on the planet. So the human population doubles from 4 billion to 8 billion in one human lifetime. And our consumption of natural resources all over the planet is exponentially rising. And governments are reacting and passing laws as they should. Consumers are asking questions and want greater transparency, as they should. And if you're an acoustic guitar maker who buys a little bit of wood from everywhere, you really need to know what the hell's going on. So who are you going to call? Maybe some dude who's been doing international forest stuff since he was 18.
Cool.
That's kind of how he stumbled into it.
Do you play the guitar out of curiosity?
There is not a guitar within arm's reach, so I will say yes. But if my wife were in the room or a guitar was present, I would be honest and say no, not really.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I like it. It gives me pleasure. I'm no good, but whatever.
Yeah, but if you can learn like a couple of your favorite songs, that feeling of playing like a Led Zeppelin song is like the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, I wish someday maybe I'll get there. But even just hitting a bunch of chords
also
gives me pleasure.
Yeah, it's fair. So, what specifically can we talk about the actual things that you're doing, that Taylor is doing, that are so innovative and revolutionary? Because there's a few like large buckets of things. You've got Africa, and you've got the urban thing. I won't put words in your mouth, but can you walk us through that?
My job, I kind of put into 2 buckets: offensive and defensive. The defensive stuff is I do spend a lot of time at international meetings because the US government and the international community, also the European Union, Australia, where we sell our product into, they are all wrestling with a global environmental crisis and trying to figure out how are we going to manage forests? How are we going to manage the global forest products trade? And what they come up with will have profound impacts on a musical instrument manufacturer who uses a little bit of wood from a lot of places. The average acoustic guitar has got 5, 6 different species on it. Some of them temperate, some of them tropical, I go to all these international meetings and try to understand what, help them achieve their objective of bringing greater transparency and responsibility to the trade, making sure it's done in a way that doesn't accidentally crush, little guitar company in San Diego. So that's the defensive side. On the offensive side, I just got really lucky because Bob Taylor, who, I don't think he had 2 nickels to rub together for much of his career, but the latter half of his career, Taylor Guitar has become a global, best-selling brand of acoustic guitar in the world. And he's been using some of his, newfound profits in the latter half of his career. He is the primary supporter of the Ebony Project in Cameroon. We source ebony from Cameroon. And 10 years ago, we started working with UCLA on something called the Ebony Project, where we planted, 55,000 ebony trees and like 45,000 fruit trees on community lands that kind of border a really important protected area. And this is wood that we have these are trees that, one, the ebony is not going to be ready until long after we're dead, but we have no rights to any of these trees. This is not done as a business play. We're simply trying to give back. The Ebony Project's also conducting all this original science. It's run by something called the Congo Basin Institute, and the Congo Basin Institute is an affiliate of UCLA. But the Congo Basin Institute is amazing. The stuff they do is so moving. I was just there in Cameroon a couple weeks back, and they're uncracking all the science about how ebony reproduces. It relies on the elephant because the seed. This is a baseball, but imagine if this was a softball. The seed is about the size of a softball, and it needs a big mammal, to eat it. Walk down the road, a couple hours later, poop it out. And that's how the ebony seed moves from its mother, away from its mother, which it needs to do, which we all need to do.
Right.
And then reproduce. Yeah. We've also got the Koa project in Hawaii, where we're helping to rehabilitate Hawaiian native forests and planting a Koa ohia forest on the Big Island, land that's been cow pasture for over 100 years. We got the Urban Wood Project, where we're trying to source wood from trees that are removed from urban areas in Southern California. Now, just step back for 1 second. Why are we doing any of this?
Right.
The real point of all of this, why I have a job here, is buying wood to build guitars is getting really complicated. 50 years ago when Taylor started, the world was filled with old growth. There were 4 million people, and that was a lot. Now there's 8 million people, and we're realizing, the world isn't filled with old growth. Trees are an insanely renewable resource if managed properly. We haven't always managed them properly. So we're investing in a lot of these projects to make sure there is a supply in the future, to help a supply in the future. And also just to give back to a resource that has been providing musical instruments with an important material for hundreds of years. And it, all goes back to Bob Taylor. Bob is a very moral and ethical person, and it's what he thinks is right. So he gave me a job, and this is what I get to do, international forest stuff.
That's awesome. Could we do a little Bob Taylor Guitars history?
So Taylor's been around for like 52 years now.
Okay.
Started in 1974. There was a little hippie guitar shop. It was like a repair shop in East County, San Diego. Bob was 18 years old, and the owner, Sam, was selling it, moving on. And Kurt Lutstick, who works there, who was a couple of years older than Bob, borrowed, I don't know what it was, $10,000 from his dad to buy the company, and he wanted to run this little hippie repair shop. And Kurt's dad said, I'll loan you the money on one condition. Who's the best guitar builder in the shop? And they're like, I don't know, 12 guys working in this hippie shop. And Kurt was like, well, this is young guy, Bob Taylor. And he said, okay, Bob's your partner. I'll loan you the money. So Bob and Kurt became the owners of a renamed Taylor Guitar, because Taylor sounded like a really American name, and fast forward 52 years, through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, especially at the early days.
Yeah.
And we're depending on the year, sometimes number one, sometimes number two. We go back and forth with Martin typically on who's the best-selling brand of acoustic. It's like Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah.
And we're now a very successful company.
What makes, for someone who doesn't play the guitar, you have acoustic guitar A and acoustic guitar B. What are the sort of defining characteristics, if any, or do you pick a favorite?
If you want to buy a guitar, it's overwhelming if you don't know much about guitars. You go into a guitar store and there's like a gazillion of them, and it's information overload. Yeah. So first of all, don't worry about the name on the headstock. If it's a Taylor, it's a Martin, it's a Gibson, like screw everything that's been marketed to you and play 10 of them, narrow it down to 8, narrow it down to 6, narrow it down to, by that point, you already know. It
Mm.
should be a little bit like Harry Potter and the wand, where if you do it right, the guitar will pick you. If you can release all of your like, oh, I've been marketed since I was, can remember that I got to get this brand and it's got to
Right.
be Adirondack spruce and it's got to be Brazilian rosewood or whatever it was that's been marketed to you incessantly. Just hold it, feel it, experience it, try some. In short order, one of them will speak to you and pick that one. That's my counsel. But more technically, the answer is, what is a guitar, an acoustic guitar? It's a machine that, one, it's a human storytelling machine, which is a very important part of the whole shtick. It tells the human experience through story, or allows you to do that. But it's also a machine that creates a sonic wavelength. And if the wavelength is high or short or fast, or that's the sound. So inside an acoustic guitar, that wavelength is influenced by how big the cavity is. Is it a big guitar? Is it a short guitar? The bracing that no one sees on the inside of guitars, the sound waves are hitting against all this stuff and creating slightly different sounds. So size and shape of the guitar impact sound, but also the woods selected. Now, if you're a decent player, well-experienced player, which I'm certainly not, I can line up 5 identical guitars. Same model, same size, same shape. One of them's got a koa back inside. One of them's got a Brazilian rosewood back inside. One of them's got an Indian rosewood back inside. One of them's got a mahogany back inside. And people will be like, boom, that's the mahogany. Like, that's the sound. So
Really?
it's kind of like ice cream or wine. Like, what's the best? Do you like chocolate or vanilla? There is no right answer. And screw anybody who tells you, oh, the only real guitar is this company and this wood. It's like, hey, man, if that works for you, more power to you. But maybe someone else whose voice is different, whose body shape is different, whose ear is different, they might like a Koa guitar, or they might like you know, ironbark guitar. Like, don't be a slave to what's been marketed to you.
Fair. But you know what? Maybe I want a guitar that has responsible environmental practices and
Then
start
you
there.
come to the right guy.
What has the impact been of how are you spreading the messaging about the work that you're doing? And I'm assuming this is different. I mean, it makes you different to have more of a focus on sustainability. And
Taylor has always, for 52 years, communicated with its customer base. Maybe, and this might, raise eyebrows across the industry, but I think more so than a lot of other musical instrument companies, we had newsletters and evolved into magazines and podcasts, and of course everyone's doing social marketing these days. But we've always told our story, and more recently, 10 years, we've been telling more of a sustainability story because we've got some stuff to say. We're not perfect. The job's never done. I can point you, if you come to the factory, I can point to 27 things that I really want to fix. But I can also point to a whole bunch of things that we do that I'm really proud of, from the Ebony Project to the Coa Project. Go to the Taylor Guitars website, click the sustainability tab, and there's more stuff there than you can absorb. But I'm really proud of what we're doing. I think we're doing more than anyone else. And I think that's a tribute to Bob Taylor and who he is and who he's all about. And Andy Powers, who's now the CEO and lead guitar builder, he is equally as interested in the future and making sure that our company is positioned for the future. And if you're an acoustic guitar company and you're not looking at the resource, if you're not looking at sustainability, the first tenet of sustainability is efficiency. And that's the tenet that everyone always spaces out on and kind of forgets. And efficiency primarily or originally was economic. Do more with less. Don't spend as much money. Like efficiency is at the bottom line, and that's all wonderful if you're a company. But it turns out it's also wonderful if you care about sustainability in the environment. Like being more conscious of the energy you're using, that the wood you're bringing in, you're not eating the heart and throwing out the rind. Like the more you can be efficient, the more pennies you have. But then suddenly you realize it's, 1990 and people are talking about the environment, and it's really good for the environment too, it turns out. We take it really seriously. I think more and more companies are taking it seriously. There are other instrument manufacturers who have a lot of respect for what they're doing, but we have an advantage. I'll just say that we came along in 74, and today our competition, the big four, you got Gibson and Fender doing electrics, you got Martin and Taylor doing acoustics. The four of us kind of dominate market share, at least traditionally. And Fender and Gibson and Martin, it's very hard historically. It's changing, but historically it's hard for them to innovate because they became famous making an instrument in 1930 or 1950, and they have a customer base. Like, how dare you tweak or modify the guitar that, Patsy Cline or Jimi Hendrix or, Jimmy Page. Like, I got a buddy at Fender who told me that once they couldn't get the pick guard screws for the pick guard that they always got. The supplier went out of business or something, and they had to switch the screws for the pick guard. And I swear to God, if we had a magnifying glass to it wouldn't be subtle difference, let's just say.
Sure.
And they actually got complaints from people.
Huh.
Like, so they're kind of a slave to their own success from generations ago. Taylor started in 1974. For the first 10 or 15 years, we didn't have any celebrity players. Nobody knew who we were. And as Bob will say, he didn't know enough to realize he was breaking tradition. For example, acoustic guitar necks used to be pretty wide. And he was just like, God, electric necks are kind of thinner and easier for people to get their fingers around. I got to make my guitar necks thinner. Well, that was sacrilege in acoustic guitar building. He didn't know. For ebony, we own an ebony mill. Ebony for hundreds of years was black. And we bought an ebony mill in Cameroon, where the Ebony Project is. And we realized that nobody knows, let's just say 50% in the world, ebony looks more like this than like this. Huh. But if you the only way you can tell is if you cut a tree. So you cut it, and if it looks like this, they would leave it abandoned on the forest floor. So let me just unpack this super quick. Industrial logging in Cameroon and the Congo Basin started after World War II, let's just say 1950. So from 1950 up until about 10 years ago, when Taylor bought a ebony mill and realized ebony not only looks like this, it looks like this. Let's just say 50% of the trees, nobody knows, but 50% is conservative, has a variegated heart and not a colored heart. And if it had a variegated heart, they left it on the forest floor because they thought the international marketplace didn't want it unless it was black. So you're telling me that 50% of the trees, the ebony trees in the Congo Basin since 1950, were cut and left abandoned for aesthetics. There is no mechanical difference. There is no acoustical difference. And when Bob Taylor found out about this, he was the guy's like, no, I'm sorry for bringing it into the factory. You don't want it. And we learned the story, and Bob said, hell no. And we put on our 814, which is our flagship guitar, our most historically top-of-the-line Taylor, 814. We started putting variegated ebony fingerboards on the 814 because if we put it on a lower-end guitar, people would think, oh, it's a cheaper guitar, less expensive guitar. You're you're cutting corners. So we intentionally put it on the flagship. And I tell you, man, for 5, 6, 7 years, we took it on the chin. People, the competition was whispering, oh, there's something wrong with the wood. They're being cheap. It's not as good. And we kept telling the story and telling the story and telling the story. If you want black, we got black. But we're not going to let trees be felled and left abandoned on the forest floor for aesthetics and vanity. We're going to use that wood. And today, if you go to a guitar store, you'll see almost everybody with variegated ebony fingerboards, because eventually we broke through and eventually the market said, I like that. Now, some people still like black, and that's cool. We got that too. But the variegated one's pretty. It's like a human fingerprint. There's only one, and it's yours. So we have an ability to break tradition that historically other manufacturers didn't have, because their customer base was like, how dare you? How dare you mess with that legendary, awesome guitar that you created in 1950? And for us, we were just like, oh, that's dumb, the way the neck connects to the body. Or that's dumb that the fingerboard is so thick. Or that's wasteful that we're using just black ebony when there's a lot of ebony, great ebony, that's variegated. So if you happen to like Taylor, and if you like Martin or Fender or Gibson or Santa Cruz or Takamine, then more power to you. Buy it, play it, love it. But if you happen to like Taylor, then you know that we're constantly innovating and changing, trying to improve the product. So we have license to do sustainability stuff, introduce urban woods, introduce variegated ebony. Because if you like Taylor, it's par for the course. So it's another kind of just bonus luxury that we inherited, that I inherited as some aging Greenpeace refugee. Now at Taylor, we get to do some stuff because of our legacy of innovation.
That's incredible. And it's like heartbreaking to think about the reality of them just chopping down all these trees and just leaving them there. It's like, I'd be so angry.
And historically, when guitars are expensive, and if you go to a store, not only are you like a slave to what's been branded to you in some cases, but people look at that guitar as if it's like, if there's a blemish or a knot, or we're talking about wood, dude. Like
right.
Wood, like it's all different, it's beautiful, it's funky, there's streaks, there's this, there's that, but people will look at it and it's got, oh man, that spruce has got to be creamy white. Do you know how you get a creamy white spruce top? Cut down a 350-year-old tree. Like the neck, it's like, oh, there's a little mark there. I don't want that. And again, okay, that's cool. But if everybody does that, then you're only using the beluga caviar of the forest products trade. And that's not sustainable. That's not cool, especially when a guitar made with, the old thing is nature versus nurture. Remember in college, your freshman year, nature versus nurture? In guitar building, is it the quality of the wood or is it design and build? Well, it's kind of both, but design and build can trump quality of wood. Now, quality of wood's awesome, but again, it just gets back to, if you're going to buy a guitar, don't look at the brand name on the headstock. Don't go back and look on the internet and say, oh, which species did this guy say was the good one?
Right.
They're all different. There's 51 flavors of ice cream. Figure out which one you like.
Well, when you say quality, how do you define that when a big factor is just, does it look pretty? Are there visual imperfections? Does that factor into?
Well, aesthetics are important. Like I like the variegated ebony and the look of the guitar, the feel. The old joke is that when people at guitar stores, you ever notice there's always a full-length mirror? Like people want to put the strap on. How do I look in this bad boy? And that's part of it.
Fair.
But ultimately, I would shut your eyes.
Mm.
I mean, if it's heinously ugly, then, to you, then okay. Or for some weird reason, you think that guitar is so beautiful, that's also real. It's also a real emotion. But ultimately, I would shut your bloody eyes and just press it against your body. I mean, it's such an intimate experience. You're breathing with it. If you get good at it, you're telling your story. You're releasing your emotions and energy through this machine, through this storytelling machine. So figure out the one that feels right against your body. Everyone's body size is different. So some people like a bigger guitar. Some people like a smaller guitar. Some people like a thinner guitar. And then, dare I say, strum a chord.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that I pick, I guarantee you, will not be the one you pick. Because we're different people with different ears and have a different vision of what it is we think is beauty. So there's that.
Scott, you're doing the Lord's work. I appreciate you, man. Last question. You guys manufacture in the U.S.? Probably a stupid question.
Oh, yeah. Every Taylor guitar is made in San Diego, California, out in El Cajon in East County, or just across the border in Tecate, Mexico. The factories are super close. People go back and forth every day. In fact, increasingly, parts of a guitar may be made in Mexico, and the other part of the guitar may be made in the U.S. and then assembled. But ultimately, every guitar is boxed and shipped out from the building that I work in Gillespie Way in El Cajon, California. You can come on out to the factory and take a tour and play some guitars. And
soft pitch of an idea. I don't know if you have any interest in this, but one component of this business is we build collaborative educational experiences. That's what the School of Imperfection website is, just with cool brands. And then we'll do like dirty jobs. I don't know if you ever watched like Mike Rowe's Dirty Road stuff. So we'll do content like that. If you have any interest, it'd be cool and fun.
Where are you at? You're up in LA? Where are you?
I'm in San Diego. I'm in South Park.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Where in San Diego?
Between South Park and North Park. I'm trying to rebrand it to Snorth Park, actually.
I like
and
that.
I'm trying to plan the Snorth Park Music and Art Festival. So that's a whole other tangent.
So I tell you what, then there's no excuse if you're 20 minutes down the road, not during rush hour, come on out. I'll give you a tour of the factory and we'll see what we think we might want to do next.
Cool.
And
awesome.
as long as it's international forest stuff, then I can justify it.
Agreed. I'll wear an International Forest Stuff t-shirt.
Nice.
I can have one manufactured pretty quick. So yeah, that sounds awesome. All right, I'll email you after this. Let's get that scheduled for sure. Are you in San Diego too, or are you in Orange County?
Yeah, it's Friday, so I'm allowed to work from home. I'm in Oceanside.
Okay, that's cool. That's not that far.
San Diego County.
Rad. Okay, Scott, you're one of the coolest people I've met lately. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you doing what you're doing.
Likewise. All right, keep saving the world. We'll talk soon.
All right, man. See ya.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the School of Imperfection podcast. If you are interested in exploring these ideas and more with us, don't forget to follow and subscribe to catch every future episode. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave us a rating or send us an email to share your thoughts through www.theschoolofimperfection.com. We're always looking for more guests as well. So if you feel like you have an interesting perspective or a topic our podcast has not covered or has, we'd love to connect with you. I'm your host, Mikey Christall. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.